Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and respected leader from the social sector from New Delhi, India, Chitra Iyer. Chitra, welcome to the show.
Hi, really
Uh,
excited.
thank you. Chitra is the co founder and chief executive officer of Space2Grow. So, Chitra, my first question, looking back over your journey, what first drew you towards the social sector when you could easily have pursued a career after studying economics and social uh, work, a corporate career?
So I don't know if the best word to use is a deviant, but I think I always wanted to be a deviant.
Hmm.
So, in school, when I got like really high scores in my 10th standard, everybody thought that I'm going to take science and, get into medical or engineering or whatever. And I decided, no, I don't want to do science. I want to do commerce because I wanted to do economics. I took commerce, and then everybody thought that okay, now Delhi University BCom karegi, and then she'll go to becoming a CA. And I decided, nahi, nahi, ab mujhe economics honors hi karna hai. And I think jab economics honors kiya, everybody thought it's going to be a MBA or MA economics in Delhi school. I said, no, no, I want to go and do this and get into social work. So I don't know. I think one definite thing was somehow never liked to be a part of a group, probably. I just wanted to be different. But at the same time, since childhood and in school, I've interned and done a lot of work with blind school, with children. I used to work with even, in the community, working with, the helps children and teaching them. And even I was 8 year old. So I don't know, something somewhere always stayed. And while doing economics, I think one thing economics does teach you is that there is poverty, there is inequality, but it's so in the books that probably I wanted to go out, look at it in the real world and really figure out what I wanted to do. So I think definitely a sense of wanting to be different, but a sense of being close to reality was always something that really brought me to, say, doing social work.
Mm.
And that's how TIS and Bombay.
Amazing. And you've done a lot of work in the area of human trafficking, child protection, and digital safety. But these are all very emotionally demanding fields, Chitra. What has kept you motivated for over 20 years?
I think the one thing is the trade-off of not being in the corporate versus what really has stood out in terms of being in the social space has been one real thing that you're able to see reality, but you're able to see change as well. It's like, it is not a disillusionment. Definitely at scale, if you have to do something, it's absolutely difficult, but at the same time that's something that you are able to see. So I
Hmm.
think one thing, I think motivation, in a sector like social sector cannot be a mood. It's not like you get up in the morning and I'm not feeling okay and I can't do this. So motivation is not a mood. So it's basically like a discipline which is combined with passion. So motivation is everyday morning, and I
Hmm.
think that's what drives you, and that's what continues to be there, to work. And one little thing I wanted to share here is that while working in the human trafficking space, I was in one of the rescues that I had been in Haldia in West Bengal, where we had actually rescued around about 20 odd girls. 80% of the girls were from Bangladesh and 20% from West Bengal itself.
Hmm.
And when we got them, and the police was there, we had to get their blood tests and their all the medical tests and everything. And when we got them to a home, like a safe custody, like a childcare institution, and they were there, and they basically hadn't slept for almost 4 or 5 days because the number of customers that they were getting every day was so much that night sleeps were never reality for them.
Hmm.
So one of the girls, when I asked her as to, did you sleep well last night? She said, दीदी जिंदगी में 14 साल में पहली बार मैं रात को सोई हूँ. So I think some of these survivors, some of their lives, some of the way they show resilience even in pain, I think has kept that motivation going, because every day morning when I get up, I feel like, okay, I mean, if they have the hope in people really making a change,
Hmm.
we have to keep it driving. So yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Chitra, let's come to your an organization Space to Grow. Tell me about Space to Grow. What was the inspiration to, you know, establish Space to Grow, and what gap were you wanting to fill with this institution?
So, Space2Grow is a social impact consulting firm. We basically work on the issues of child protection, digital safety, anti-human trafficking, and provide advisory and programmatic services to the government, philanthropy, investors, and nonprofits. And why Space2Grow? Because while working in the nonprofit space and having worked very closely with the government and others, there was always this feeling that, if you're working in one organization, you continue to do that, and you also are constantly, working on a particular issue. But there are
Mm,
enough and more organizations doing similar work who need the capacity, to be able to come together and do collective impact.
mm,
While working in an anti-human trafficking organization, everything depends on funding. And, one of the times what happened was the FCRA of this particular organization was frozen, and it took almost 2 years to get it back,
mm,
and there was a lot of work around it. And at that time, I started feeling that just because funding dependent organizations cannot take care of survivors, because if you have so many survivors, the organization had around 4,500 survivors that they were working with,
mm,
and suddenly everything just came to a halt. So at that time I felt that you need, many such organizations working, and just one organization cannot really fulfill what the collective need of a
mm,
survivor is. And that's why Space2Grow was born, to really support and bridge that gap that existed in the sector, which is bringing funding to organizations, but also to be able to bring in technical expertise to organizations to speed their growth.
mm,
So that's why Space2Grow. And one another thing was, there are not many organizations that are child protection technical specialist consulting firms.
mm,
So it was important to set up a consulting firm which could, roll over the sleeves and be at the ground, but I also work at the strategic level with the government, philanthropy, and investors. So it was important to really bring all of that together, and that's how even the name Space2Grow. It's for growing of a lot of organizations
correct,
coming together as a
correct,
collaborative.
correct. Well said. Chitra, from your experience, what are the biggest threats facing children today that parents often tend to underestimate?
So, one thing is that children today are digital natives. These are not children who did not have a phone when they were born. So, all of them have had a mobile phone or an access to a mobile phone.
Mm,
Even in rural India, what we have seen is that in researches that we have done, that 99% of the children have access to a phone, even if
mm,
it's a shared
yeah.
device. So, I think one of the things that parents underestimate is that they still feel that it's going to be a stranger in a playground who
Mm,
is a threat. They don't really see that there could be a stranger or a known person in the internet space who can
mm,
actually be a threat.
mm,
So, the understanding of parents on the need for digital etiquettes, digital behaviors, digital discipline is something that parents absolutely seem to, totally disregard in terms of, looking at it as a threat. Of course, the digital space has a lot of benefits, and there is so much that children are getting out of it. But I think being able to teach them how to navigate that safely is something that's extremely critical.
mm. Very interesting. Very interesting. And what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about child safety?
So I think one of them, and this has been a recent find, even when we have done research, is because many a times when training programs happen on digital safety and jab school mein jaate hain and then they start talking about safety, whether it is digital or offline,
Mhm.
everyone really speaks about one thing about all of this being like, issue of stranger. Koi kahin kuch kar sakta hai.
Hmm.
But they don't see that it is in your inner surrounding and in the place that you are that there are people who can be threat as well. So
Hmm.
one of the reports by the WHO in a huge systematic review of what is happening in the digital space and the impact on children, it says that 60% of the children who are harmed online are harmed by people who they know.
Correct.
And also within our country itself, when we look at cases of POXO, which is the absolute child sexual abuse in the offline space,
Hmm.
over 80% of the perpetrators are within the community or close to the neighbor, or there are incest. So I
Wow.
think somewhere the whole misconception of all of this sitting outside somewhere and not really accepting that this can be within the space that we are actually also limits prevention and
Hmm.
actually supporting children when they really need. Because
Hmm.
many a times what happens is we've done a training program where when parents are told ki online space mein kuch hua hai, the kids have said, come back and said, parents have said ki online में ही तो हुआ है तो छोड़ दो कोई
Hmm.
बात.
Hmm.
या फिर family में if a child comes and talks about a relative actually abusing, we would want to really not talk about it. So I think
Hmm.
these are some of the key misconceptions of all of this sitting outside, but this is pretty much inside.
Very interesting. And yet, areas like gaming, social media, AI, ed tech, these are all constantly bombarding every child.
Yeah.
Where do you think parents should be most concerned?
I think parents have to be concerned about one thing as to their relationship with their children.
Hmm.
I think today it's not about anything but the conversation and their, uh, you know, creating that safe space with their children where they can be open and talk. So it's not about what a child is taught, but it is about what a child does in that critical moment.
Hmm.
So I think if in the critical moment, if the parents have created that space that a child can pick up the phone and say, "I'm in a mess right now, and can you come and help?" And if a parent can not with absolute zero judgment go and help the child, I think the parents would have done something really meaningful. But at the same time, I think a lot of onus and burden of responsibility comes on parents. But I think it's important that the entire ecosystem which actually protects children, which is both the school, the platforms, and law enforcement, all of them have to come together and act and do their responsibilities.
Hmm.
So platforms can't say that we have a safety by design approach, but not really be responsive to the child when they are in a situation of
Right.
harm. So
Right.
I think it's important that all of us have a role to play, but parents' role critically remains in terms of being able to create that safe space of being
Hmm.
able to have a conversation.
Hmm. Well said. Chitra, you also worked extensively with survivors of trafficking. And you gave me the example a few minutes back about these girls you found from who had come from Bangladesh and sleeping. How has trafficking evolved over the past decade, and what are some of the controls that are being put in place?
So, I think one of the key things that is happening in the trafficking space, I think one is there is a lot of, again, demystification that needs to happen. So, people think that internet has really come up now and it's accentuated the problem. But honestly, even 10 years back when we have actually, I've worked in the anti-human trafficking space, we've seen that just a simple mobile repair shop is enough
Mm.
for actually trafficking a girl because you give the phone, the repair shop uses all the access and the contacts, reaches
Mm.
out to a girl and says that, I'm in love with you and kind of stuff. And the girl is in an adolescent space, figuring her own life. And then that becomes like an enough, trigger to actually get caught in a mess of trafficking.
Mm.
So, internet did not have to have that connection. It just had to have a mobile to actually get a girl lured.
Right.
So online was always a problem. Offline traffickers used to go, like for example in West Bengal, in a lot of missing persons program cases, when we have been to Jalpaiguri, they would say कि मैडम कोई आया था और बच्ची को ले गया. But
Hmm.
the same thing 2 years back when we did a research on looking at virtual threats and real harm, like what's happening, they said कि बच्चियां फेसबुक पे थी और गायब हो गई.
Hmm.
So the whole way it is evolving is that all the offline traffickers now don't need to actually go into the community to lure a girl. They just can be in the hidden space of the technology where they can actually, traffic girls or traffic boys, and actual trafficking can evolve.
Wow.
What has really happened in terms of changes? I think one is two Supreme Court judgments which have come up very solid. One is a Supreme Court judgment which says that any kind of child sexual abuse material in the digital space which is being possessed by anybody or even transmitted is criminalized now. It's not that it's there and if it comes to me, I can say that, it was just there with me. The fact that I own it is also criminalized. The second piece of judgment that has really come recently in the case of anti-human trafficking is victims have been given the right to rehabilitation end to end by the Supreme Court. So it's a right that has been given to victims, and that needs some amount of course, execution and
Right.
everything by organizations. But the Supreme Court is also taking note of all of this.
Hmm. Very interesting. What have survivors taught you about resilience that the rest of us often overlook?
I think for us, sometimes Ashutosh, it's like resilience comes from reading a book, or probably going back to spirituality and doing a lot of things. I think for them resilience comes from pain.
Hmm.
And I think being able to have resilience while you are in pain is the true resilience, because their life will continue to have that story forever.
Yeah.
But how are they using that pain to really fight back and come back again and again and say that, I have won and I want to do this and I have hope for my life and I want to
Hmm.
rebuild? I think that is resilience.
Hmm.
And to give an example, we had really looked at doing some skilling program in a childcare institution. And this was one of the kind in terms of skilling program. It was not like a typical chalo tailoring karte hain and all of that. It was more like digital literacy or like a BPO kind of training in a home. In the initial phases, one of the survivors who really, totally struck me and I'll never be able to forget is that when we had given them pencils and sharpeners and all of that, she had just been rescued and came to the childcare institution. She was so much in anger and lack of trust that even जो pencil जो sharpener होता है उसका जो blade है उससे she cut herself, she
Wow.
harmed herself. And then because she felt guilty, she felt that she was the one who actually did what she did.
Hmm.
And the program happened, the program ended, she was counseled of course, and all of that happened. And once the program ended and when they were given certificates, so she said something very beautiful. She said, this is the first program I've ever attended where I've learned to respect my own self.
Hmm.
So the whole shift from being guilty to actually being able to respect oneself, I think that little thing was a huge change.
Hmm.
It's not about whether they get a job tomorrow, what are they doing, but the fact that their guilt can transform into respect for themselves, I
Hmm.
think that is resilience.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Moving on, if you could recommend one major policy reform to improve child protection in India, what would it be?
So, two things. Sorry, I'm going to say. One
Okay, two.
is, one is, there has to be time-bound redressal of
Correct.
cases
Yeah.
for children, and there are POCSO courts. There are courts which are specific to children, and I think that is something that is extremely critical. That there is time-bound redressal. The second thing that needs to really happen for children is that they, even though the court and the laws talk about that the child does not have to be a witness
Mm.
and doesn't have to speak in front of the court, I think that needs to be done more.
Mm.
Children should not be brought in front of the court or in front of the criminals or in front of anybody, and their statement should be like a given, and
Mm.
it cannot be questioned anywhere except in the most child friendly manner. So I think really focusing on these two can really help. If the response system becomes better, the reporting gets better, and it becomes easier for children to be able to come out and speak about it.
Mm. And you also, work with corporate leaders. How do you convince corporate leaders that child safety and digital responsibility are business issues as well, and not just a CSR initiative?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge because I think it's not about children specific, because all corporates have different mandates and then they have to do their CSRs in their own mandated
Yeah.
way. But I think somewhere, as a country, we do not give importance to children so much.
Mm.
And I think, I don't know if it's just because we feel that, there are so many of them, but the whole point is that it's the so many of them who are going to build the India tomorrow. So if even within the CSR budgets, if there could be a fraction of money that can be focused on children, whether it is education, health, child protection, I think that will go a long way in terms of support.
Mm.
I think the second thing is, we worked with a large edtech company, Vedantu, and made them child safe in terms of their platforms, in terms of their work. And what really worked there was the connect of the founders to their own children.
Right.
They felt that, if my child, I don't want to be harmed on any platform, then why would I want any other child to
Correct.
be harmed on my
Correct.
platform? So I want to really put in that investment. So really having founders who are absolutely aligned to children and safety and the future of children, I think can go a long way in terms of really convincing them that, this is really making a difference.
Very interesting. Chitra, I have time for two more questions for you.
Sure.
If you had the attention of every parent in India for 1 minute, what would you tell them?
I think one thing that I would want to tell them is, basically to say that, threats are not very far away. It's within the house. When you have a mobile phone, when you have a digital era, it's inside the house. It's not somewhere outside. But at the same time, I will go back and say the same thing, Ashutosh ji. Build the beautiful relationship with your child.
Right.
Be non-judgmental, create that safe space, continue to have conversations and make them feel that you are there. I mean,
Mhm.
just be there,
Yeah,
that's the most important thing.
absolutely. And my last question for you, Chitra, if Space to Grow succeeds beyond your expectations, what do you think India will look like 10 years from now?
You will have a youth prime minister.
Correct.
You will have the voices of children, voices, the agency of children reflecting in the entire political processes, in the governing processes, in the policy processes. And I think that's where we need to move as well, because we do a lot of work without having their agency, and
Mm,
it's important that their agency gets reflected across. And I think that's the priority for us as a country as well.
absolutely. And on that note, Chitra, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been. I think the most powerful message that has come from you, other than so many different points, is how important the relationship is of every parent with their child.
Yeah,
If that is a strong bond, if that's a strong relationship, then steps will automatically get taken to protect the children. I,
absolutely.
I just love the way you gave me the example of some leader who says that if I need to protect my children, why can I not protect the others as well? Thank
Yeah.
you so much for everything that you're doing for children who are the future of our country through Space to Grow. Thank you for talking to me and all the very best to you.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation.
Thank you.
Really loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.